So let's see. Unmute.
So I don't know, are we live?
I think so. Looks like it is.
Hold it.
It says it's now streaming live on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say,
Spelled wrong.
huh?
My name is spelled wrong.
Oh,
I think Tody knows it's a pet peeve.
I know.
On
I'll
your-
have to, I didn't schedule this one, but I'll make sure it's right the next time.
On the screen, Karen, or
Yeah,
Yes.
it's spelled differently.
what's wrong? The first or last name?
First,
It's Karin actually,
Oh, right. Yeah. Of course.
because the email. Yeah.
All right. Well, while we wait for Tom to take the finish up his call, I'll just call roll call. So it looks like we're all here. We don't have to do anything formal, right? So we have a quorum, and welcome to what has been called Subcommittee 1 for the Charter Review. And Tom and I thought that what we do is we just simply, Tom's going to share a screen that has a compilation of everyone's comments and suggestions as it relates to the sections that we've been tasked with. And I thought we'd just simply go over them, read them, and look at folks that are not on this particular subcommittee's comments, of course, but then add our own. And I don't know, Karen or Mary, if you've submitted any documents for your comments, or you're ready, or you're prepared to just make some live today, which is fine, of course.
I mean, I have some comments to make. I didn't have anything prepared to submit.
Oh. Okay, that's fine. And Mary, feel free.
Yeah, I didn't have any prepared to submit, but I kind of wanted to just look over before, I feel like we're still in those beginning processes. So I still want to kind of get more information.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As I do as well.
That's good, because I feared that this document didn't contain some of your thoughts. So I haven't shared either. I plan to do it as we go, kind of live.
Yeah, we want to make this nice and comfortable and painless.
So what I've shared here, you might recall Liam Gallagher has been collecting comments from other committee members. This was, I guess, even before we decided to go the subcommittee route. So it seems to us that we ought to consider those as part of your deliberations. So I've culled out or extracted from the master document just the four articles that we're responsible for. And you'll see that the different comments or questions related to other committee members are shown here in highlighted yellow. And there's a name that attributes that question or comment to. So Mr. Wood, the floor is yours.
Okay, so we'll start with Article 3, of course, and that's Town Manager and Section 301. So this talks about how the town manager is chosen by the council solely on the basis of character and executive administrative qualifications.
I'm not sure how I got here, but yeah.
Well, yeah, well, you can blame me for that in part anyway. It was an easy choice too, by the way. So I don't know if you want, we can all read, right? Do you want me to read it aloud, Karen and Mary, or?
No, that's okay.
Okay, great. So
I'm
we
on
can
this.
go, so we can go right into the comments here. So Mike S. says, personally, I believe restricting town managers to inhabit the town is counterintuitive. Living in the town could even lead to subliminal conflicts of interest, but if it had this issue with their superintendent, had to relocate from Saco. And I know that person does not need to reside here initially, but to have them relocate within a year is tough. And then he talks about Kenny Bunk historically has had a town manager from out of town, and Wyndham does currently. I know there is a provision from the town council to approve this, but I think we should consider change here. And then Allison says requires state residency at time of appointment. For example, familiarity with Maine statutes. And recommendation from Leon is clean up the language regarding town managers shall not reside outside of the town of Scarborough without the approval of the town council. So that's kind of saying the same thing in a different kind of way. Is this a one-time approval, or would the town manager be required to seek approval of town council each year if they are not a resident of the town? So essentially in the charter, it requires a town manager to relocate to Scarborough within 1 year. do you have any opinion on that? Do, Mary or Karen, do you feel that needs some change or rewording or?
I mean, for me, I think Mike S's comments kind of bring some general questions. I don't know if Tom can answer them, or I think maybe looking at what other towns do. Sort of new at this, sort of surprised to see this as someone with kids and, you know, with working parents, and where there's, you know, maybe there's someone who's really qualified for a job but wouldn't even apply because of the residency requirements. I don't know how that is. That was one of the things that I was curious about, was how other towns are. Maybe this is how it's consistently done throughout the state. I mean, that was my reaction to Mike S's comment. I don't know if you want to break them down by comment.
No, that's fine. That's good. Mary, do you have anything to add?
I do wonder about that, I think there are benefits to having, you know, the town manager live in the town, but then also I just know it seems like sometimes town managers, that can be a difficult thing to find a town manager. I don't think there's as many people, and Tom, maybe you can speak to this, but my understanding was it's not an easy position to fill because it's a it's a big job, no doubt. And so I do wonder if that limits, and I'd be concerned about requiring state residency at the time of appointment, because I just feel like that limits. So I feel like it's better to be a little more open on that. But
Yeah, I guess I'll weigh in. I've got obviously a unique perspective here. It's quite common to require your manager to live in the community. In fact, I would go so far as to say that's really the rule. The exception would be the not requiring it. There is the ability of the council to waive that requirement. And I think to your point, and they're all good points in terms of attracting a qualified candidate, I would hope a legislative body, the council, would consider waiving that requirement if it meant attracting the right person to the job. Personally, I think it's really important for the manager to live in their town. I've done this 30 years and I've always chosen to do that, whether I was required to or not. But it really removes a big part of kind of complaint that when it comes to taxation or any other decision, the easiest criticism is, what do you care? You're not affected by it. So that's just my personal view. I think the language works quite well and wouldn't recommend any change in this regard. I guess the last thing I'd say is to suggest that someone will approach their job differently if they don't live here is a bit of an insult. Anyone in this position is a professional, and I would expect they would fulfill their duties regardless of where they live. So the basis of it is a bit offensive, but by the same token, I understand, and it's fairly commonplace.
Now, I think that I wonder if some of the hesitation might be because of the perceived or real cost associated with moving to the town. I mean, I would imagine years ago, this may not have been much of an issue. But as we know, Scarborough and other coastal towns in Cumberland and York County have become exceptionally expensive to live in. But that being said, I certainly, as a citizen of the town, really do feel much more comfortable knowing that the town manager intends to move into the town or already resides in the town. But
Yeah,
now, Mary, you mentioned real quick something about being a resident of the state in order to apply.
That's Allison's comment here.
yeah, I was just, because I was looking at the other comments, and
Oh, I see.
I think Alice, that was the comment I was kind of speaking to, was I would worry that if you required state residency, that would limit the number of applicants. So I wouldn't be in favor of that.
I would wholeheartedly agree. When my position is open, I would hope you do a nationwide search. And frankly, there's not enough talent in this state to expect that you'll find multiple qualified candidates.
Yeah, and I've only been involved in the selection of one town manager, but my best guess is that a town like Scarborough doesn't have any problem attracting some well-qualified candidates when the job opens up. But
Yeah, and the dirty little secret about this business is it's the same stuff all over. there's slight differences state to state, but it's the same. To suggest that someone coming from another state is at a deficit is really not the case.
So in summary, would it be accurate to say that the three of us on the subcommittee agree with the language as it exists? Or do you see any opportunities to tweak it in any way, such as what I think Leanne suggests? Or we can wait on for further, but the general message of this section appears to be well thought out and should essentially remain unchanged.
I mean, is Leanne really saying fundamentally anything different? It's just a different way of wording it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Mary and Karen, you think we can move on and generally agree that the language as it exists
Yes.
doesn't.
Yeah, no, I think the committee members made some good points and we've discussed them, but I think it's not worth changing it.
All right, thank you. And it doesn't mean that this subject or any of the ones that we talk about later on, either today or our next meetings, can't come up for further discussion, as it will in the main committee, I would imagine. So section 302, removal of town manager. Town manager may be removed for cause by the town council in accordance with the method and procedures set forth in the general laws of Maine. Mary S. says, not just this section, but there are a number of references to the general laws of Maine. I would like to know which one specifically. That's pretty close to what my comment was.
Yeah.
We didn't collaborate, but
No.
I think throughout this document, and this is a good example here, is I think the language as it exists is fine, except I'd like to see this document have links when it refers the reader to certain laws of Maine or state statutes, et cetera, that it could afford the reader an opportunity to link to that law or a place where they can get further reading. That was my point of my comment.
Yeah, as I recall, this was a discussion point the last time the charter was reviewed. And I think the town attorney advised that we keep a general reference, such as just to general laws of Maine that are appropriate and pertain. And I think he was suggesting that just because those laws do change from time to time. And so a general reference is probably a safer bet than a specific reference, to the extent that the legislature changes the law and it is problematic in the context of our charter. So maybe the accommodation is, and Mike, I understand your point, when there's a specific reference, having a hot link in this day and age makes perfect sense. And maybe it's implicit here, but it's really the pertinent, or what's the other word I'm thinking? Relative or related general laws. There will be a couple of specific ones that will come into play in this regard, and others undoubtedly in other cases. So
are you saying that it should be devoid of any kind of link to any place that someone might find themselves willing to do more research?
Well, your point's well taken. I'm not sure if this is an appropriate one. I think there are other,
Okay.
Tony, are there other places where there's specific reference to statutory guidance?
There are a few, I don't believe there are in the charter, but other like the ordinances they reference, but I don't believe there is any more any in the charter.
Would you be okay if we pose that question? Because I think that's going to come up as a reoccurring theme throughout the whole document to the town attorney, just about the best way to accomplish that.
Right. And
Okay.
what do you think, Mary?
Oh, I just was going to ask Tom, is there a way to reference just generally, like referencing, like not the specific law, but the sections, or would the sections also be too specific? Would there be still concern?
No, I think you could probably do certainly by title, because that's the kind of the broad,
Yeah.
in Title 30A or what have you. But again, I think this general reference is to guard against the legislature, someone other than us, making changes that have implications.
That
Just
makes
an
sense.
incorrect reference anymore, outdated or repealed or what have you.
Hmm.
Karen, you've got a paralegal background. That doesn't mean
Yeah,
you're,
so I had the opposite reaction as to Mary and Mike. I don't think the charter should be bogged down with specific cites to statutes. I think it can get very confusing. And I think at that point, when you're recalling a town manager, the town attorney's pretty involved and he'll be able to tell you exactly which statutes they're looking at specifically. That's kind of my reaction. I think generally when we go through all of them, I think sometimes it kind of bogs it down to get the statutes listed in there.
All right, well, it looks like we're kind of like maybe in the middle there. And so maybe I'll just agree with you, Tom. Maybe you can just put it on the side and maybe look into it a little further if it can just a general link, just getting the reader to a general area might be in the favor of the larger committee. I don't know.
so let me just probe a little further. Mike, is your intention really for the ease of someone that wants to dig deeper to be able to find that next level reference?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because like to Karen's point, I certainly don't want this document to get bogged down and being overly specific. But like you mentioned, there's other areas in this charter, I believe, where it refers to statutes or general laws, but without any further specifics, and that's fine.
Mhm.
But I thought it would be advantageous for the reader if they wish to do further research to provide them at least a direction to go to.
You know, the other thing that occurs to me, and this is really kind of terribly self-interested, but I do have an employment contract with the town, and that would come into play to some degree in this event. Should it be referenced here? I don't know
Yeah.
that that's necessary.
Tom's
Right.
comment actually made me think it's kind of a slippery slope to say which statutes are you quoting, because then you're quoting the removal of town council, now you're quoting contract agreements, and it's very wide, but then you could also restrict us if you don't list all the right ones.
Yeah, and I actually agree with you, Karen. I don't think we should get that specific. I just thought we, like I say, just, point someone in a general direction. But again, this is not a hill I'm going to die on, certainly.
Yeah,
No,
no,
Mike,
I'm not.
Mike, your point's well taken. This is the people's document, right? So it should be as understandable and as explanatory as someone wants it to be, so to speak. So yeah, to make it as user friendly as possible makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Any further comment, Mary or Karen?
No, I'm with you, Mike. It's not something that I'm intensely passionate about, but it's just something I did wonder about, and I do agree it is nice for it to be clear, for the reader, but I understand not wanting to bog it down too.
Okay, 303, Town Manager, Chief Administrator. Have you ever been called that, Tom?
I prefer CEO, thank you, rather than CAO, but
So the only comment here, we have 303.1. And now, let me interrupt here. Tom, did you X out those sections that are going to be discussed at the larger committee?
yeah, that's something I want to make sure we touch on before we leave. The only ones that were kind of held back are in Article 9, and I think
Okay.
I'd like to talk about those further when we get there, but nothing in Article 3 or, yeah.
So 303, we appoint all statutory officers required by law to be appointed, provided, however, that appointment to the head of any office, department, or agency shall require prior confirmation. And Allison says, list statutory officers, heads of departments and agencies, question mark.
Let me just direct your attention to this 3039, prepare an administrative code, which does exist, and I can pull that up if you want to see it. But it essentially does what Allison's asking about.
Okay.
So you'll see it goes through my position, and then it's the structure beneath me, if you will. Finance, town clerk, police, fire, planning, so on and so forth. So her point's well taken. I just don't think it's necessary here.
Well, this if I can, this allows me to make one of the points that I'm really going to wait till after the main committees together to talk about general structure and and organization of the document in general. But this might be a good place for me to make my pitch for what I call notes. For example, like 303.1 might have a note that says, see the document that Tom just pointed us to, for further information.
Yeah, and here again, I'd like to get the town attorney and really, I understand the point. I don't disagree with what you're trying to do, but keep in mind this is a sacred document, and I think simplicity is an important construct. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I see this is going to be a reoccurring challenge to make it user friendly and at the same time have it serve the kind of important purpose it does.
Okay. All right, I get it. Yeah.
We intend to have the town attorney. I think we want to use them, I'll say sparingly, kind of collect a bunch of things and have them and just make good use of his time. So I think Tody's going to be, and I'll keep a running list of issues that we'd like to have him prepared to speak to.
Okay. Mary or Karen?
I'm
mean,
okay.
My response to Allison's is I think, again, I don't want to bog it down by kind of reiterating maybe something that, it says all statutory officers. So if there's any question, it addresses all. I don't think we need to list them out. I think one of my things is, I don't know how many edits we can present to town council at the end, but if we're going to discuss them, should we maybe keep them bigger where it's, we want to add little references and things like that. I don't know if that's something that we should be keeping in mind when we're doing these things.
Yeah, keep in mind the actual language changes go to the voters. So these will, what this committee recommends and the council approves actually appears on a ballot to the voters. So having it readable and understandable is an important endpoint.
Yeah. Okay. Mary, anything?
Yeah, I don't see the need to list all of that. That seems like a lot to me, so.
303.2, appoint prescribed duties of and remove all officers and employees of the town appointed by the town manager, except as otherwise provided, and except as the town manager may authorize the head of a department or office to appoint and remove subordinates in such department or office. My comment was really just kind of a discussion point. If I'm reading this correct, this appears to allow maybe some removal of heads of departments without the concurrence or discussion of the town council. Am I reading that right or wrong?
That does. Yep. There are really only 3 appointments that, and actually only 2 that I make that are subject to council confirmation. One is the police chief and the other one is the assessor.
Okay, so of those 2 that require confirmation of the town council, is that correct?
Yes.
Does 303.2 allow you to remove them without town council?
Yes, it does. And I think the reason for that is they serve, though it does require council confirmation in the first instance, they are my subordinates. I oversee their performance. And I think there's another point that so as not to politicize appointments.
Yeah, that's a big point right there.
To keep it under the administrative arm of government as opposed to the political legislative arm.
All right, good point. Mary, Karen?
I don't have any issues with it as written.
Okay.
Just as an aside, and I'm not suggesting this, it's a curious system in Westbrook. The mayor's, I'll call him a strong mayor, and has direct appointment and removal authority for certain department heads, not all, but most of them. And so with a change of administration, new mayor, they can clean the slate and bring in all new department heads. I wouldn't advise that. A different form of government, but it's different way of doing it for sure.
All right, good. Well, thanks for indulging me in the discussion. Karen,
Yep.
did you have anything to add, Karen?
No, I think Tom kind of touched on what my concern was about it in regards to like his role and, getting town council involved and things like that.
Okay, excellent. 303.3, prepare an annual budget. I just put, is a date of submittal something that should be in here? I don't mean to say, specific day and month, but that's somewhere else, is it not, Tom?
That's in Article.
502.
Yeah, it doesn't have a date specific, Mike, but it has a bunch of timeframes. Like I must submit within a certain number of days before the end of the fiscal year. The council must act within a certain number of days of me submitting, so on and so forth. So I think when we get to Article 5, it's sufficiently addressed.
Okay, all right.
There might be some tweaks, but I think the building blocks are in place there.
I think personally, when I went through this document, I just started from the top to the bottom, so
Sure.
very good. Anything, Mary or Karen, to add?
No.
What else we have? 0.5, attend meetings of the town council except when removal of the town manager is being considered. So there's a typo here, according to my guess. And I just had a query regarding attend. What do they mean by attend? I mean, do we believe that means sitting with the town council as you typically do on a town council meeting, or can you be in the audience? I mean, would that ever be argued?
It's a good point.
I'm thinking if we're going to discuss removal of the town manager, they probably would like to be there.
Well, in fact, this raises a question in my mind. I believe I have a right under Maine law to attend. The council can meet in executive session, but there's certain other proceedings that I can insist are done publicly. So I think this needs a little more work.
Yeah, maybe some wordsmithing, and we don't want to get bogged in that. I get it, but preside over or whatever. I don't know, but that was my only purpose of bringing it up. Mary,
It's a little gray, but I mean, I think it kind of gets the point across. I think Tom said it. I mean, he's also a resident. Any resident can attend a town council meeting, and they can also be excluded from executive session.
Yeah.
I think it just means he can't sit up there on the panel and be an active participant of a town council meeting.
I'm not sure when the prior or two managers before, he did in fact sit in on the meeting where they were going to go into executive session to discuss his termination. And he did sit in the meeting. He was sitting at the council, within the council, when they were making those decisions. So truthfully, I'm not sure whether it was after that this came into play. I'd have to do some research.
Yeah. Well, I think that example might allow us to maybe agree to pause maybe a little bit as to the language here.
Yep.
Mhm.
Mike, your initial point was, what does attend mean? Is it just being there present in the space? Is it being a participant, so-called, in the meeting?
Yes, the latter.
Yeah.
I think that if a town council is going to discuss the removal of the town manager, they certainly have every right to be in the building, in the room, except for maybe executive session. But I don't think necessarily. I think the point of this article is to not have that town manager sit at the town council chambers.
I suspect the legislative intent, because it says the town managers have the power and shall be required to, and in this case, it's really to make crystal clear that the manager must be at council meetings, that I can't, it's not just an expectation, it's a requirement that I can't just choose not to go to as part of my job and responsibility.
Okay. Good enough.
So I think maybe we'll kind of put that in the parking lot and circle back to that one.
Yeah, and might only be another 5-minute discussion. That's good enough. And Mary and Karen, if you don't have to restrict yourselves to just the ones that are highlighted, of course. Just interrupt me if there's another one you want to talk about. What are we talking now? 0.7, oversee purchasing of all departments. MS says, for a town of this size and spend, Should there not be a purchasing agent? And given the size of the school budget, why is the town manager not ultimately responsible for this also? You want to take on that responsibility, Tom?
Yeah, as a practical matter, I do have a purchasing agent that's spelled out in the administrative code. The second half of that, I think there's very clear division between two elected bodies in a two separate administrative systems. So I don't want, and I don't think the manager should have control over the school budget.
I agree. And plus, at the end of the day, I mean, you're responsible for the town-wide budget as it is.
Yeah, I mean, technically the school is a department of the town, but elsewhere in the charter, it makes very clear the council's authority in its budget approval, its bottom line only, and it has its own administrative structure, legislative and administrative structure to operate Scarborough Public Schools.
Karen or Mary, you have anything to add?
I agree with Tom. I don't think that should be, I don't think, I think it should be separate.
Says a former
Yeah.
chairwoman of the school
Yeah,
board.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
no, I mean,
you're-
I think there's a reason it's set up this way, and I'm sure most of the other towns and governments are functioning and do it this way as well. That works.
Yeah, and frankly, Mary, you know more about this than I do. I know that there's a whole host of state statutes that that talk about the separate board of education, so on and so forth. So I think we'd be running amiss of some statutory prohibitions otherwise.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right, point 9, prepare an administrative code submitted to the town council, be responsible for its administration after adoption. What's CE?
Oh, Cape Elizabeth, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
Could be, yeah.
Town manager shall give bond for the faithful discharge or his or her duties to the town of such sum as the council shall determine and direct, and with surety or sureties to be approved by the council, the premium on the town manager's bond shall be paid by the town. What's that say? Is that a suggestion for language?
No, apparently the way it's worded, that is so legalese, it's got to be lifted right out of their charter. There is a surety bond that is taken out, paid for by the town to cover, my official actions and cover any malfeasance or, anything that should happen as a result of that. Trying to think where that's memorialized. It's certainly in my contract, and I believe it's in my job description.
I don't think it's in the charter.
I'm not opposed to the concept here. I think it's something we already have in place, and it's a good construct.
Maybe we could make a note asking for us to either find it somewhere else where it might exist, or maybe it does belong in the charter somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know whether it should necessarily go in this string of things or somewhere else in this article.
Yeah.
It
I
could
think
be
it's a suggestion, and I think Tom spoke to the fact that it's in other contracts that he has currently with the town. And I think it's sufficient in my mind to say, oh, well, thank you for the suggestion, Allison, but Tom has actually told us this is addressed in different sections.
Yeah. So we want to make a note, I think, for purposes of the main committee and others, just to say that we recognize the note as the previous notes, and to say that this can be found where, or this exists
Yep.
here.
Yep, and I'll get the answer to that. This just brings it to a higher level, that the voters would say that this is something that must be in place, that the council must approve and the town will pay for.
Right. Well, I'm-
Again, in concept, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just sure if it fits perfectly here, or if it's necessary. I think it's probably overkill.
All right. As you scroll down, absence of town manager.
I just want to note for your benefit, there's no comments here, but this is a really important protection for the town manager, really to ensure that that my staff is not influenced or directed, mind you, from any member or members of council, that they must go through me for those sorts of communications.
Yes. You want us to bold it? Suggest it get bolded?
No, I guess I didn't want to simply pass it over without just commenting on the importance of this for kind of the preservation of the system we have, system of government. You can't on one hand task me with all these responsibilities and then go around me and undermine it.
Exactly. One way to do that is to put the title with the text instead of having it on a separate page.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
On a few occasions, I've had to direct counselors to this language in the charter, and it's been productive in stopping the behavior, but not always.
No, I could see how that can be, if not abused, just not understood. Absence of town manager. Given current activities in federal government, maybe we should look to have the equivalent of the 25 amendment. Specifies the town manager can be removed in accordance with Maine general law, which I am sure takes forever. Can anybody help me out, understand what that?
Well, as I recall from the proceedings in Washington just last month, the 25th Amendment has to do with the removal of the president.
Yeah.
Yeah, this simply isn't the form of government we have. There's a town council that's a legislative body who hires me. They are my employer, not the voters of the town. It's a representative form of government we have. So this really flies in the face of that basic form of government.
I mean, the existing text is pretty clear to me as to the process. Should you be incapacitated for one reason or another?
I'm sorry, I was thinking in the context of removal, but you're right, this is under absence of.
Yeah, disability, temporary absence of disability. I'm thinking like, something unfortunate happens to your health where you need like 6 months and.
But even, I traveled to Australia, 4 or 5 years ago and gone for 10 days. Yeah, so now I have an assistant town manager. It's very clear the line of authority runs to him.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to make sure this organization functions, that in my absence or disability, there's someone that's able to assume all the powers, duties, and responsibilities of the position.
I don't know. This is just for discussion. Is there any that's a good example, Tom, and I appreciate you providing it. But let's say it's an absence that does not have a clear end to it. Maybe it's a more serious reason for, not being able to perform your duties. With everyone's hope and prayer that you return, should there be a time here? I mean, I can understand, appointing the assistant town manager for a period of time, but if it gets beyond a certain amount of time, I wonder, is there anything that helps us out with that as a town council?
Well, I think it talks about that scenario. So in the first instance, it allows me to designate a qualified administrative officer to perform the duties during temporary absence or disability. Goes on to say, in the event of a failure of the town manager to make such designation. Oh, I see. You're saying, but also the scenario in the event that it extends beyond a temporary absence or disability, the council would actually make that appointment.
Yeah, I mean, you might see a situation where, you appoint the assistant manager, but then now we come to find out that it could be up to a year. I mean, in many ways, we're blessed with, the folks that perform those duties for us. So I can't imagine us being disappointed in who might be the temporary manager for upwards of a year, but I don't know. I mean, this is.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, you mentioned a good point. I mean, what happens if it does extend a year? I'm hospitalized for an extended period. The person that I've designated, they don't like, or what have you. Perhaps there should be the ability for the council to step in and make that appointment. themselves.
Or make it permanent. I don't know. What do you think, Mary? Or
But then do you have to also watch out for like FMLA and, you know, all that? Like, 'cause you wouldn't want to give away a job if, you know, that person has a medical, you know, I
Right.
don't know how that interplays.
Yeah, I mean, they would have to, I'm thinking of like an interim appointment, which could be for an extended period, mind you.
Yeah.
But, you know, they can't appoint someone else in my position while I still hold that position. There has to be some separation,
Yes.
resignation, dismissal, or otherwise.
Right.
Death.
anything, Karen?
I think it's a little slippery to try to put timeframes in there. I think, you know, Mary said FMLA, disability, you know, I don't know what happens when someone's disabled and they work for the town of Scarborough. I feel like there's probably other outside factors that would come into play.
Okay. All right. Well, we've memorialized our comments, right?
I don't hear any specific change, though.
No, I'm still kind of like, you know, I mean, I don't want us to, I personally would rather us not focus on removal of the incapacitated town manager, more on the extended absence of the town manager. And whether the person acting in his or her stead is satisfactory to the town council for X amount of months or longer, that's all. And if,
Yeah, short of defining what temporary means,
right,
I don't know how you
right,
address that, Mike.
okay. I'll stick with,
Mike, do you want something like, something about an interim, like if needed, that, you know, an interim could be assigned? Is that kind of where you're going, or?
well, I was thinking like, you know, like in Tom's example, you know, he goes to Australia for 10 days. That's easy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he puts Liam in charge or whatever. I know he's, and there's been others that have performed the duties. But in the worst case scenario where the town manager might be disabled, and they put that same individual in charge, we're all fine. And now it's 6 months, it's 9 months, it's 12 months. Does the town council have a recourse to consider, you know, acting on making that person that's performing those interim duties beyond temporary, or I don't know, maybe I'm just making a mountain out of a molehill. I don't know.
I think the way the council could strong arm that is to separate with the manager, and then it's up to them to fill that position.
Yeah,
But don't you think in a case like that, there'd be ongoing communications between the town manager and the individual that's acting in his place? Don't you, I would think that based on discussions or based on, there'd be you'd actually, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. It's just that, say he's going to be 6 months. I think over that course of time, there should be discussions around with HR on the possibility of how long, and then a plan could be implemented from that.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
You have the tools to do that, do we not, Tom?
Yeah, I think these matters would resolve themselves. The manager will realize that they're not able to come back and resign, or there's some sort of amicable separation to move on with life. But, you know, imagine the scenario, God forbid, you know, I go into a coma and, you know, zero brain function and not likelihood of ever returning, but haven't resigned. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not, certainly not a comfortable subject to talk about, but, all right. Well, we've talked about it, and maybe we'll talk some more on the main committee or bring it up again. Are we good with moving on, Mary and Karen?
Yes.
Okay, we're in Article 7. Anything else to add for Article 3?
Did you, oh, no, never mind.
Okay, Article 7, general, let's see. Section 701 is planning board, but in general comments, Mike S. says 704, so we should talk about that, I guess, first. For example, requires members of long-range planning to either be a resident of the town or an owner of real property. My question is, why this one and not the others? When he says others, is he speaking of like,
Other committees.
Other committees.
so I guess I don't know what committees, the planning board must have a requirement, right?
Yeah, the difference is they must reside here. This carves out and allows for reside or own real property.
And that's unique.
Yes.
Makes sense.
And this is the most recent addition from a committee perspective in the charter. It was put there in 2010. I think the recognition was, particularly with this committee, property owners have equal interest as do residents in the sort of growth and planning affairs.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree. Mary, Karen?
I think it's important to have that voice as well. It makes sense to me.
As a practical matter, I'm not sure if anyone ever appointed this committee weren't residents as well, but it's a good catch. It's unique in this provision. In my recollection, that's why it was different.
Mhm.
I will say there's a fairly intense interest on the part of council, so I don't know what we may see from the council in this regard.
Is interest in what, fine tuning the language or?
Well, the mere existence of a long-range planning committee and their duties and responsibilities, particularly as it relates to growth. The other complicating factor, and I'll just pull it up for you, is, so this was done in 2010. Subsequent to that, in 2011, the council passed a resolution that gave further clarity to the charge to this group. And here it is. So it's a little awkward in that regard that we've got a charter provision, which I guess is not, that's a legislative, what's the term I'm thinking of? Authority, so to speak. And then this provides some further clarity as to the duties and responsibilities of that group.
Mhm.
And this is all within control of council. It's a resolution of council as opposed to the charter is, of course, approved by voters.
And that came out of the CPIC, right?
Well, it was, yeah, as you know, Mike, it started as the original comp plan committee in the drafting formation phase that morphed into the CPIC implementation committee. When the implementation was done, we saw a need for keeping this band together, but really appreciating their charge is slightly different. It's not working on the comp plan, it's really dealing with development and growth issues, a broader scope.
Yeah. Well, I personally don't have any issues with the way it's written, and we'll read these other comments as well. Karen and Mary, do you have any comment regarding real property owners and or residents of town?
No, I had a general question. Actually, I just thought of, and this doesn't have to do actually with section 704, but I don't see any of Nick's comments, and I know he sent his separately. Did those get added to this document?
Good catch. I'm not sure if they did. I have them here though, and I'm pleased.
Okay. I just thought of it because I was like, I haven't seen anything from him, and I know he had sent something, so.
I mean, generally, I think 10 years ago, you guys took a lot of time and effort to put together the long range planning committee. Seems to be evolving and doing okay.
Let's just pull up Nick's comments and see if he has anything on point.
Yeah, I'm looking for that Excel as well.
I've got it right here. So we're now in Article. Good news is I don't see anything for Article 3, which we just.
I thought there was a couple. Well, there's a 305, was it? 303.
There's one. Yeah, you're right. 303 and 305. Do you want to just go back to that, Mike, just to make sure we understood what his comment was?
Yeah, I lost the video. I don't know why. Why did I lose the video?
So Nick's,
No, I'm sorry about that. Okay.
so Nick's point on 305 here. Well, I'm sorry, let's go to 303. Let's take
Yeah.
them in order.
303, there was an issue recently with the addition of the assistant town manager as to whether or not the role could be created within the department. Could have helped the scenario, giving authority for town manager to hire within a department, create a position as long as it held to the overall budget of that department. So this is in reference to that section that talks about the town manager having the authority to hire department heads, et cetera, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think there's generally, some people weren't really happy about the assistant town manager, and I think he's trying to address some of the residents, I think,
Hmm.
reaction to that, but
Not the individual personally, but
no,
creating
the
the position.
creation, I apologize. Yes, the creation of the position, I think. And when I read that, I think that's some of the people's things, but I think that's fully within the town manager's control, and most towns have those.
I think actually Nick is mistaken here. The assistant town manager position was created straight through the front door. I went through the budget process. We got funding approved. When the first assistant left, I chose to hire a communications person under my department. And we've combined some other ones. So we stayed within budget. And that's what was controversy, is the communications position.
So, so that's kind of an important point, is it not? I mean, if I was on the town council, I mean, the town council would be weighing in on your interest in creating a position by virtue of the fact that it's showing up in the budget.
Well, their authority begins and ends in that regard from a budget point of view. And I was able to work within the budget authorities granted to me to bring that new position on. I combined two other positions to make that happen. So that's probably, the authority is really granted in Article 5 under budget.
Yeah.
Once the council passes the budget, they hand it back to me to administer. And so long as I stay within the limits that they give me authorization for, I'm fine. And to be fair, this was only one counselor that was concerned, but.
Well, I can see that, over years' time, you can see how the staff can grow with citizens' feeling of it not being checked. But, I don't know. I don't really have anything to suggest references. I'm comfortable as a citizen, as a town, as a counselor to have checks on this through the budget process. But Karen or Mary, any comment on that?
His next point there on 305, this is in the absence of the manager.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's right that it ought not to reference the position of assistant town manager. It ought to be left generic, that I'm allowed to designate a qualified administrative officer.
Yeah, can we see the language as it exists again? I'm sorry, 305, right?
It's the one we talked about.
Yeah.
Right.
He's saying now that we have an assistant town manager and that position by its job description acts in my absence. I think what he's suggesting is he's wondering whether we name that position here. But I think his preference is actually to keep it generic. Should language stay there if it is not the assistant town manager, and that's a possibility. I could change the job description tomorrow.
Yeah,
I think it should stay generic because,
I do too.
yeah, I don't, Because you never know, what if their budget cuts and you have to cut, maybe you can't sustain this assistant town manager at some point, maybe there's a,
Right.
Catastrophe where you have to cut half your staff or something, you just don't know,
Right.
what could happen.
Yeah, in the past, I've designated the police chief and I think the planning director in another instance.
Right.
So I think keeping it generic and, stating it as a qualified administrative officer should provide sufficient protection.
Yeah, I agree. Karen?
I apologize. I'm just coming back now. I missed the last 2 minutes.
Oh, man, you missed a lot.
No, I lost my internet connection. I don't know if it's consistent on Pine Point, but I get kicked off a lot. So don't worry about it.
Well, Tom, can you summarize?
So we were just looking back at Nick's comments back in Article 3 here.
Yep.
And I think you were probably here for the discussion on Section 303. Yep. The question here relates to 305 in the absence of, in my absence, who serves in my capacity. And he was just observing that we now have an assistant who, by the job description, is the manager in my absence. And he's asking the question, should we name that position here? I think his preference is not necessarily keep it generic the way it is, just a qualified administrative officer to keep some flexibility. And sorry, I'll go back to that language just so you can see it.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I think also, we might not have an assistant town manager in 7 years, so you don't want to kind of put that in there and create problems.
Right.
Show it to be unanimous.
Okay. So back to Article 7.
Point of order. How much time do we have on this phone call?
It is unlimited, but I do have puppy duty at home at 6:30,
Okay,
possible.
Right. Good. Because I just want to leave, 5 minutes or so for any closing comments or scheduling our next meeting, et cetera. So feel free to throw the flag. All right, Tom?
Yeah, I might suggest that let's get through Article 7. Article 9 is really meaty. It's there's a lot of pieces to it. So I don't think that's something you want to wade into because you're not going to get through it all.
Sounds good. Be good with that, Mary and Karen?
Sounds good.
Okay. So Article 7, municipal development. We talked about 704, right?
Yep.
Okay. 701, link to state. There I go again with the references, but we all know, I guess.
No, we'll ask that question, and it depending on the answer, it will have effects throughout the document.
And I will have later comments regarding how we show changes, et cetera, but that's for another time.
Well, expand upon that. You mean for purposes of keeping track of our process here and reporting out?
No, I'm talking about, like, I'm looking at this now, section 701, I see at the end, amended November 2nd, as noted, effective January 1. I don't know if that's, and there's other places in this document where there's, more than one date showing like it was amended in 95 and 99 and 2006. And I just have a hard time thinking that that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, maybe there's some historical annotation on the cover sheet as well, and maybe it can be displayed elsewhere, but I think there's some historical value to talk about so someone can pick it up and understand this is first adopted in 1969. It was changed in these years. This was an attempt, and I think the last round, this was the first time we attempted to try to actually embed within the charter so people got a sense of what we actually changed.
Right.
You don't know exactly what that was, but you know what section was affected.
Well, I have some ideas maybe for the larger committee on some of the ways the FAA shows their changes and amendments that we may find it attractive, we may not, but maybe even just an explanation of changes page of some sort. But
I have that document if you want to speak to it.
nah, it'll get lengthy.
Okay.
Let's do that another time if you don't mind. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I submitted it to everybody anyway. Okay, so anything on 701, 702, Mary or
Nope.
Karen?
Mike, I want to be clear, that's FAA, not FEMA, because I'm not sure if we should follow, no, sorry.
Yeah, that's FAA. Hearing none, I guess we can move down a little bit.
Okay,
Board of Appeals. Should this be more correctly titled Zoning Board of Appeals?
Karen, what say you? Being a current chair, is that correct?
Not anymore. That's why I'm doing this.
Oh, okay,
I mean, I don't think it matters. Again, I mean, it's kind of all dictated by state statute. I don't know what the other towns call it. I think there's a couple different ways that people refer to it, but
it's a good question, though. I mean, to the extent we've got a planning board and we've got a zoning, yeah, it's not exactly clear that that appeals board applies to the zoning as opposed to applies to planning.
well, maybe it gives the residents the appearance that they can appeal anything they want, but they actually can't.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea.
But
I'm curious what other towns call it.
yeah, I mean, as a practical matter, it is the zoning board of appeals.
It probably should be called that then.
Well, maybe we should be holding more appeals, not just zoning ones.
Well, I
we-
think there is, Mike, what's the appeal process for planning board? Superior Court?
Yeah. The appeal, it's to override an ordinance or an action?
An action of planning board. I think it's Superior Court, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I like ZBA.
That's something that we can certainly get a legal answer on, but if it is ZBA, maybe not in title, but in text, we ought to be clear what the appeals rights pertain to.
I mean, you could, to make it clearer, instead of having it as a separate section, it could just be, section 702A, so that it's clear it's under zoning, you know what I mean? Instead of just Board of Appeals, that if you couldn't say nobody calls it zoning Board of Appeals, if that's a non-starter, you could just, make it section 702A. I don't know, somehow to make it under the zoning ordinance.
Makes sense.
Yep, that's a good.
I mean,
idea.
it also does address specific, it does say the board shall have the powers and duties as provided by the ordinances of the town. So if you go to the ordinances, you would find that the Board of Appeals only has the right to do the zoning. But again, as Mike said, you want this to be a document that people can touch and understand.
Yeah. No, you're right. The clarity probably exists within the zoning ordinance and so on and so forth, but
Well, if we call it zoning board of appeals somewhere else, we probably should call it the same here.
all right, that's a good catch. We can certainly get some input from legal counsel on that, how we can just clarify it.
LPIC. Did we talk about this? Yeah, we did.
Yeah, Tony, with the recent changes to the charge, no, that doesn't necessarily have any bearing on this, but they changed the membership, didn't they?
Yes. They moved the council liaison and the planning board liaison as non-voting members and added 2 new members to replace them.
So interestingly, the charter language doesn't talk about,
No,
yes, it does. So I think giving a nod to the current council and their preference, this language should be changed.
to reflect, yep.
Right.
Well, this actually isn't inconsistent because it simply talks about 5 regular members and 2 alternates.
My interpretation, this just seems like a description of all the other boards where you have 5 members, 2 alternates, and then every board has liaisons and town council representatives.
Yeah, so I don't think the charters, these 2 are inconsistent with each other, actually. This just actually adds an additional 2 representatives that are non-voting.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I don't think it's inconsistent.
Okay.
And did Nick have any comments on in 7?
Oh, good. I bet he did. So he's saying require residency, not just ownership of property. That's probably a point the full committee will talk about, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think our sense on the subcommittee was we liked it as it is. I don't know if we have to go so far, if we could ever imagine that the LPIC could be made up of a majority of non-residents. Not sure I would like that per se.
Well, remember, the council holds the appointment authority, so if they do it, it's by their own doing.
True.
But the voters are laying out what the expectation is. So if you want to be clear to guard against that, you ought to.
Right.
So Nick's making the same observation that we just talked about, which is the voting structure changed recently, should update language be incorporated. And then he's got a larger comment here. Wow.
I don't know if we should get into the weeds on deliverables on just a description of the existence of a LPIC, right?
I think his point here that the council should weigh in, and I know some councilors have a lot of opinions about this. So I have no doubt that this 704 will get sufficiently chewed on.
Any thoughts, Karen, Mary?
To me, that seems like a lot to put in there. I can't imagine
Yeah.
putting that much detail, but
Just the backdrop to this is I think some members of the council, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I get the sense that they feel this committee, because it deals with growth and development, they feel this committee has a lot of power and authority. The reality is they are advisory to the council. So I don't see it that way necessarily, but I think that's a concern. I'm not dismissing it, but I think there's a number of councilors that want to keep the authority in check. I think that ultimate check is that the council, one, appoints them, and two, they're advisory to the council.
Right. Okay, we happy? Is that 7?
That's the entirety of 7. Yep.
Okay. We have anything else, Mary or Karen? I like Tom's idea that we can start our next meeting anew with 9.
yes,
Okay.
that makes sense.
I just wanted to flag for your benefit, and Tony, maybe you could look at your notes and confirm this, but the two sections that were pulled out of subcommittee work were both in Article 9. And forgive me as I go there. So the first one is noted as 901.5. So it just seems curious to me that it was only this subsection that was pulled out.
It was to do with the threshold numbers?
This 25%? Okay.
Yeah. And I believe 907 may be the same. I wrote the numbers and then underneath it I put threshold numbers, so.
Well, 907 makes sense because 907 is the entire section, if you will. Right here, right? So all of this section. I was just curious as to why it was that one little slice of 901, just 0.5. But
I don't recall.
I think you're right. It's these numbers.
But was it also for the recall too? Were people, because I thought there was a lot of things about the threshold for that as well.
I think it does fall under, oh, sorry, the other way.
What? Say again, Tony?
I think it's to do with it's to do with the recall. I believe that's what it's around.
So in fact, when we get here, this would pertain Probably the thresholds. Are there any thresholds in this one? No, but there are in recall.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what we ought to guard against, is when we get into Article 9, it's any of these subsections that have thresholds, I think was the
Yeah.
expectation of the full committee to talk about.
So because we are a subcommittee and this is our section, should we be doing research and maybe getting a little more information? Like when I say that, I'm always curious what other towns are doing and how they operate and what their thresholds are and what their percentages are. Is that one of the things the subcommittees is supposed to be doing?
I think that if there's parts of this, of any section that you wish to make an argument to improve or change, I think that would be wise for you to have some background information to convince others.
I don't want to change people's minds, but I'm wondering if we have an obligation to do that.
Yeah, I think, this subcommittee approach gives you the ability for this committee to bring forward actually some tangible recommended language changes that are subject to the full committee's consideration, right? For these areas that are kind of pulled out, I think it's entirely appropriate for you to kind of do some of that work to help guide, shape that conversation of the full committee. It's probably stopping short of a recommendation, but I think doing some background research and having, I would, yeah, being kind of the discussion leaders would be a way to consider it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Tom, I had a question because I think you had mentioned that, I'm not sure if it was the recall of elected officials or if it was other parts of this section 9, that was a change most recently. Was a change in 2010?
It was this, yes,
Yeah.
this section 903.
So it was 903 that was changed.
Actually, the petition format and procedures were also
They were-
adopted that
Okay.
because we didn't have anything in the charter at the time. So a lot of the section 903, 901, 902, most of that that was reviewed on when we amended the charter the last time.
So that was more to kind of clearing it up and codifying it, petition process for the different actions. But Mary, to your point, a brand new notion came forward under recall last time through.
I think it might be helpful would it be possible to see some of that, what was discussed prior? Because I feel like since it was new, that might be something to.
Yeah, I mean, Tony's put together kind of the report out from the last review committee.
Okay.
It doesn't have all the detailed
Sure.
debate back and forth, of course.
Yeah.
I do recall distinctly, and frankly, I was the chief author of much of this and advocate. I think recall is an essential part of good government. It gives power to the voters that if they don't believe their elected officials are properly representing them, there's some recourse. And frankly, I'm going off on a tangent. I thought that the standards we put in place and the kind of requirements to go through this process were sufficient to ferret out a rogue attempt or a vendetta or something like that. Because I don't think, I think it needs to be fairly rigorous and onerous, frankly, to do such a thing. And of course, we did go through a recall in town following this process.
Yeah, Liam sent us a little history from the Portland Press Herald on a piece of the discussion.
Oh, okay, I haven't gotten a chance to read that yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Check that out.
You'll see that one particular counselor was advocating for a very high threshold.
Oh, I remember that distinctly, Mike.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's best for you to maybe pick this up fresh. And Tony, it might be helpful for you to give a primer maybe at the top of the next subcommittee meeting.
Sure.
Talk about the petition process.
Sure.
But it's really designed to serve three purposes. One, the voters can override an action of council. They can, two, actually create a new ordinance by themselves outside of council action. And three, they can use it to recall elected officials.
Yeah.
So I'll stop sharing.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. Appreciate that. When can we meet again? I think Mary and Karen, I don't want to speak for you, but I believe Thursday was best and Wednesday possible.
Yes, that's what I'm,
You have the full committee meeting next Thursday,
We do.
and then I have zoning board on Wednesday, but that's at 7.
Okay. Well, you don't want to go from here right to there, do you?
I'm not the chair anymore. It's not as engaging. You know, I,
Tom, you gave me a couple dates for next week that work for you. What, do you remember what those were? I could find it on my email, but,
Yeah, Wednesday's tough. I've got back-to-back night meetings
okay.
too, but I could do Tuesday or Thursday. That'd be the 9th or the 11th.
The full committee meets at 6:30.
Yes.
That's right.
Mary and Karen is 5 Thursday work? Does that work for you, Tom?
It would. Lots of screen time. I'm just sensitive.
Yeah. Or,
I could do it, or Tuesday either.
or Tuesday. Tuesday work, Karen or Tom, or?
That works for me.
what time on Tuesday?
Anytime for me is okay, but I know my guess, Tom, tell me if I'm wrong. My guess is Tom would like to turn the lights off at town hall and come right onto here. So 5
Are you
o'clock.
talking about the 9th, this coming Tuesday?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have back-to-back meetings that night
What's that, Tony? Oh, Shellfish?
in Coastal Waters. It
Okay.
starts at 5:30.
Okay. Any chance of doing a lunch and learn?
I mean, actually Tuesday during the day would probably be best.
Huh.
I mean, I have my kids, but I can.
Do they know anything about charters?
Right, we could use some help.
They know the Shoup charter.
So I do know that Subcommittee 3 is meeting at 11:30 on that day,
On Tuesday?
on
Yeah,
Tuesday.
I have to pick my daughter up at 12:45 on Tuesdays, but then after that, I'd be available for most of the afternoon.
Mary, can you get a chunk out in the afternoon?
Let's see, Tuesdays.
Do I need to call your boss?
Yeah. I think I can make that work. Yeah, I think I can make that work.
And I don't have my schedule in front of me. Believe it or not, I'm working full time again.
Are we thinking afternoon or late afternoon?
I'm here in afternoon, like 1-ish, 1:30. Is that right, Karen?
Yeah. I could definitely do 1:30. I could probably pull off 1.
Don't make it so tight that it's uncomfortable.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm disadvantaged because my schedule's downstairs and if we could do that as a placeholder right now, say 1:30 Tuesday? Does that work?
Okay.
Sure.
And, I don't have to be there. I mean, I know that's a small committee and it's best that we're all, but I think it's as important that we move along too, so. But I have a 90%, it's 90% that I can probably be there, but I have to go downstairs and check my calendar and make sure I don't have meetings.
So why
Would
don't you,
that just, oh, sorry, Tom.
I was just gonna say, confirm with Tody and we can make the arrangements upon your direction.
Okay. All right, I'll email you, Tody, and let you
Okay.
know. But as of now, it looks like everybody can make 1:30 next Tuesday.
And since that's a daytime meeting, would we just do an hour? Because I just don't think I could do an hour and a half.
Yeah, let's do it now
Is that okay?
with a half-hour break.
Mary, does your day look any better later in the day, 2 or 3? I'm just trying to be.
I'm kind of a little bit in the same boat as Mike. I don't have my work, calendar with me, so I don't think I have any, I think I can probably make that work, but it's like an hour and a half might be a little harder than that, so.
I would agree, you know, as far as, even if I have an opening, an hour would be the most I should push it, you know, so. We can get a lot done in an hour. We get a lot done today.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. I'll bring up when we have some luxury of some time, you know, some of my ideas as it relates to organization and showing document changes and revision dates, things of that nature. But I did submit a couple large documents, and forgive me, I could have probably got away with just a few pages of it, but I was lazy. But I don't want to bother with it now.
Speaking of that, I want to make sure that all of you have access to the extent you want it to our shared Google Drive. I don't even know where that is.
Just thought I would email Mike every time I had an idea.
Too many windows open.
Got your email up there. There you go.
Yeah, was there anything I shouldn't have showed?
Showed your contract. I tried to get on that shared drive with Betsy's invitation, or at least she showed me the link. And
Yeah.
I needed credentials.
Yeah, as I look here, Tony, perhaps tomorrow we can get IT to open this up for committee members. And the reason I
Sure.
say that is here is the repository of comments. Mike's referring to this document here.
Okay.
So there's no reason that you all shouldn't have equal access. You can drop documents in on your own. So we'll make that happen, and I'll announce that at the next meeting.
Okay.
Would she be sending an invitation for us for that with a link, or?
I believe when I sent out, I believe I sent that information to you. Those that didn't have a Gmail had to go a different way, and I supplied that information, but I can do it again.
Oh, okay, I can look back and find it. So that was from you, Tody? Okay, I can
Yeah.
go back and find it. Thank you.
It's
Yep.
probably something we ought to address at the full committee next week, just so everyone has, gets the proper instructions at the same time. But
Mhm.
it just strikes me, we need to open that up so it's a resource to all of you as you need
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And Tony, feel free to send it to me again, so it's at the top of my email.
Sure, not a problem. We'll do that.
All right, anything else? Any closing comments?
We do have a need for taking public comment, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yes, of course. Now with this screen, I'm new to this Zoom thing as certainly as a quasi chair, but how do I know that this individual is out there?
There are no attendees, so therefore I don't believe there's any public comment.
I see. Okay. So I would refer that to you because you're the host.
Yep.
Okay. All right, excellent.
Undoubtedly, we have hundreds, if not thousands of people watching us live on YouTube, but they're simply not actively participating in the meeting.
Excellent. I'll have to wear a tie next time. All right, I'll make a motion that we adjourn until Tuesday at 1:30,
Yes.
unless otherwise changed. And I'll get back to you, Tony.
Okay, sounds good.
Second, all in favor? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.